as we all know, the offseason was dominated, obviously, with Kyrie Irving's name.
Mm-hmm.
You brought up a point that I don't think a lot of people thought. You said your feeling. So,
Yeah.
obviously, you're around these players. You talk to them. What
Yeah.
is the feeling that they're getting from Kyrie Irving? And you said you think he'll be back. So, do you have
Correct.
anyone telling you, hey, we're talking to Kyrie, he might be back, he might not? Where is
So,
Kyrie Irving and
yeah.
the Nets relationship as a whole?
So right now, the Nets and the Kyrie Irving relationship is a patience game. I think right now what they're doing is they're giving Kyrie Irving some time, and obviously they're also looking at what the heck's going to go on. There's this vaccine mandate with Eric Adams coming in as the mayor, right? There's heavy belief because there was a couple quotes a couple weeks ago that Eric Adams said he's extremely optimistic Kyrie Irving's going to play. Then he gets reelected. Then he gets elected last night, and now he's the new mayor of the office. Obviously, there's a lot of loopholes with what he's saying about the mandate because what a lot of people don't really realize is that he's really focusing the mandate or lifting the mandate when it comes to city employees. That doesn't really apply to Kyrie Irving as a whole. That's just my personal belief. I wasn't told that by anyone, but even to go back with how the players are really dealing with this, Kevin Durant's been very honest with us throughout this whole time. Kevin Durant's always been like, hey, obviously we miss Kyrie. We'd love to have him part of the team, but at the end of the day, it's a personal decision. Obviously, any field, any job, any personal decision comes with any form of consequences. And the consequence is that since Kyrie Irving chose not to be vaccinated, he is not able to play in New York. So as a whole right now, they're all missing. They're missing Kyrie Irving, but at the same time, they're not missing that. Obviously, they're missing his production. They would have to replace that production by committee. But at the end of the day, you also got to remember that that this team, it's healthier that they're adjusting currently without him rather than having him only for away games and in practices at home, because that just ruined kind of continuity and rotations. But just overall, they're all being honest with us. I think it's a patience game. I think what the Nets are doing is they're waiting on a Kyrie to give them a decision or let them know what the process is like or what his plan is going to be for the foreseeable future. So whether that is, hey, are you going to get vaccinated? Are you going to come back? Or are you waiting on the mandate? What's going on? So that's kind of what the heavy belief is right now, that they're kind of just waiting on that.
We are talking to SB Nation Nets daily writer and reporter Chris Milholen. Now, Chris, I don't even think that the Nets this offseason was the talk of the town. It was really the Knicks.
Correct.
And because the Knicks have really stood out this offseason, I think it's really hidden what the Brooklyn Nets quietly have done. And and you look at the Knicks, and the Knicks have started off very strong and now slowly have not played well in the last two games. They're 5-3. They're tied with the Nets. And the East is going to be very close throughout the season. Do you think that this offseason has helped the Nets, being that they're not the talk of the town like they were last year, to help them slowly but surely move forward this year? Or do you think it's hurt them knowing that the Knicks have gotten better and have gotten more, have really become a more depthful team with their offense than anybody thought they were going to be this year?
You know what it comes down to? I think they're both two different teams and two different ballparks. Obviously, the narrative's going to be there that the Knicks run New York. There's no question about it. Anyone that's from New York or knows anything about basketball knows that New York is always going to be a Knicks town. The Nets could win 5 championships, it's still going to be a Nets town. I mean, a Knicks town, right? Obviously, you could run in the winning perspective, saying, okay, you know what, the Nets, hey, if they win 5 championships, obviously they brought winning back to New York. New York hasn't had a sports title since 2009, so it's been a while. But the thing is, too, at the end of the day, is that what the Knicks are doing is they're similar to what the Nets are getting done in 2018, 2019 with D'Angelo Russell, right? They're embodying a new culture. They're embodying kind of that dogfight mentality, being a scrappy team, something that kind of an underdog in the whole conference to begin with. And I guess what the correlation to the Nets' point of it is, I think at the Nets, they're chasing championships. The Knicks are more chasing kind of building a contender, right? Making it an attractive destination. Because one overlapping factor that a lot of people don't really realize is a lot of these guys that are entering the league have never seen the Knicks be a good basketball team. They've always been a pretty bad basketball team. So with that being said, obviously New York has a lot of glamour being an athlete, but a lot of people also know that playing in New York, it's a lot of heavy media pressure. There's a lot of stuff that also comes with playing in New York. It's one of those things. So at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see how both teams turn out. But I think as of right now, it's always fun. And obviously New York, I could speak for, I guess, the city of New York being obviously some guy that's been here my whole entire life. It's one of those things that we've never really had the Nets and Knicks be great at the same exact time. Obviously the Knicks aren't great, but they're finding a foundation. They're obviously winning here. So it ramps up their crowd as well.
So is there a point with Kyrie Irving not knowing when he's going to come back? Is there a point or a circumstance in the season where you think they either have to, one, maybe even trade him for another swap, like another player for like Kyrie Irving for Ben Simmons type trade, or Damian Lillard or somebody else that's on the trade block? Is there a point where they might have to do that, or even just trade for a point guard with whatever draft stock and like young players they have left? What would be that point in the season and why? And like, would it be amidst other circumstances?
I can't really give a point right now because the thing is, like, I feel like they're continuing to experiment right now, right? And they're obviously, like I said before, I think like 5 times already, like they're adjusting to like what the current pieces they have right now. And the big thing here too is the Nets are listening to calls for Kyrie Irving. They're not aggressively making calls themselves, but hey, like any team, they're going to do their due diligence here. You know, if you're calling for Kyrie Irving, at the end of the day, everyone knows the NBA is a business. And obviously Kevin Durant will have his voice, James Harden will have his voice, you know, and obviously owner and GM as well. But at the end of the day, the Nets have really embodied themselves on culture. And obviously Kyrie Irving, you could say what you want about obviously his off court, but on the court, he's a generational talent, 50, 40, 90 player. In addition, he's obviously, like anyone knows, he's a Jersey kid that grew up a Nets fan. The Nets have never won a title before. So he's a player that a lot of players in this community and fan base are really attracted to as well. So at the end of the day, you know, I think looking ahead, I would say maybe that tipping point is if the mandate isn't lifted of some sort, or, you know, there's no really kind of clear other alternate path aside from Kyrie Irving saying, hey, the only way that you're going to be able to play is to get vaccinated here. I think that would be the only tipping point to this thing. But in the meantime, I think the Nets are, like I said before, they're going to take a patient approach. They're letting Kyrie Irving kind of sit with this decision for a little bit, see what's going to happen, see what his thoughts are, whether he's eventually either just going to get vaccinated, the mandate's going to lift. There's so many little moving parts to this, and like Steve Nash said, they're going to evaluate all the little details that go into this situation as it develops on through these next couple of days, months, and really throughout the whole season.
I hate to bring up another Kyrie Irving question, right? Because it feels like when you bring up the Nets now, he's like the number one trigger.
Well, brother, you know I'm used to them by now.
Well, I'm sure you get asked them all day long. It's been widely known now that the Nets are not giving him an extension. Is that because they're waiting to see how Kyrie treats this vaccine thing? Or do they not plan on bringing him back with Durant? Because Durant signed an extension himself. They're obviously not going to let just Harden walk out the door. That's why I asked how their relationship is, because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so how I can answer that one in a nutshell is mostly, in regard to the extension, right, is that Kyrie Irving, he had a deadline for his extension like James Harden, right? Obviously, James Harden didn't sign the extension either. I think it was October 16th was the exact date. And now the only possible time that they could offer the extensions in the offseason, right? So that's kind of what they alluded to when they said that they're not going to offer them the extension, was mostly they weren't going to meet that deadline. So I'm not going to be the guy that's going to completely rule off an extension here, because obviously if he comes back, then they'll have it and he produces like he always does. They're going to obviously say, you know what, maybe we're going to give this guy an extension. Because obviously, as you guys know, the NBA is very a player empowerment league and build on a lot of relationships. Players come to join super teams with forces with common history and common experience. Kevin Durant has made it clear that Kyrie Irving was a huge factor, if not one of the biggest factors in joining the Nets, right, from the very, very beginning. And at the same time, obviously, James Harden being there obviously helps out. James himself has even said, hey, I don't see myself leaving Brooklyn. I might not have signed the extension, but it's going to be very hard for me to leave this situation. With Kyrie, I think what they're doing right now, it's obviously the main reason they didn't offer the extension was because of this vaccination status. Why would you offer a player a full extension if you don't even know what his future is going to be in the biggest anticipated season in franchise history? You know, they want to know what this future holds. So obviously that was the biggest reason why they didn't offer the extensions, because obviously it was foreseeable that he's not going to play, right? Because like at the end of the day, if he's not going to get vaccinated, the only hope that this Nets team really has right now is that lifting the mandate from the new mayor. And that would come as early as January. So think about it. Obviously, you offer him extension, say this mandate goes on and on, whatever the case is. Obviously, at that point, like we all know, in any city, obviously the mandate rules and regulations, they get updated every single day, week, month, and everything there. So it's kind of the safest option, because at the end of the day, too, it relates to the decision. You know, once the extension wasn't offered, it was going to be a heavy belief of, okay, obviously the Nets made the practice facility a private building that authorized Kyrie Irving to practice. He was only eligible for away games. Why would you give a guy an extension for that? You know, so they're just trying to find that common ground, see what they're dealing with. But I wouldn't really rule off an extension completely off the table at this point.
I don't believe they're going to lift the mandate, no matter who the mayor is or not. I think this is.
I agree with that.
I think it's going to stick around I don't. I know the mayor says, well, it might not. It might. The fact is that New York is a highly. First of all, it's a Democratic place. And it's a liberal place, and so is California. I don't think that's changing. My question to you is, everybody keeps talking about Kyrie Irving. I love Kyrie Irving. He's from this tri-state area. I talk about him going to Duke. I'm a Duke fan. I just don't like what he has said ever since he's come into the league. He said a lot of stupid things. And when he spoke...
Right here is good. Yep.
When he spoke on his Instagram thing, I believe Kyrie Irving is the most important piece to this team winning a championship. I don't think it's James Harden. As much as I love what Kevin Durant did in the playoffs, without Kyrie Irving, you could see that this team doesn't roll on all cylinders. If the Nets don't get Kyrie Irving back this year, do they have any chance of going to the NBA championship and winning a championship? That's the first question. And do you think that James Harden was the right piece when they decided to make that trade away Karis LeVert, who now is back playing with Indiana? It looked like he looked really good tonight, and all the pieces that they gave up. Do you think he was the finishing touch of this championship run that they believed they were going to make?
Oh, 100%. I agree with that. Because, the thing is with the James Harden trade, when a superstar pops up on that on the trade market, you have to entertain it, right? You have to really kind of dive into it and be like, okay, if he's going to be available, you have to make that trade, And obviously Sean Marks was talking a long time, kind of just not mortgaging the future when the whole trade was happening and kind of everything along those aspects. But, the big thing was with James, he was viewed as a luxury at first, because obviously Kyrie Irving was there and obviously, he's just going to be the facilitator like we talked a little earlier. But, right now, would I say that they have enough to win it all? I say they do have enough to win it all. Do I think they're going to win it all? I don't think they're going to win it all. The Milwaukee Bucks, they're one of those teams that are just not they're built on continuity, push the ball in transition, weakness for the Nets, very good at rebounding as well. So, it's one of those. Plus the Lakers, they're not missing any players. Plus they're forming continuity as well. And if health's on their side, that's a really big contender for that. So overall, like I said before, I think they're going to be aggressive looking in the buyout market. And then the other aspect is if Kyrie Irving comes back, then, hey, obviously all this talk is just going to diminish, So it's a very big script with this Nets team. And at the end of the day, you got to look at it this way, with this many personalities, it's expected that something of this little drama goes on.
In regards to the way the NBA is now with these super teams, these big threes, getting these other veteran minimum guys. So Kevin Durant, being that he's with LeBron, people argue who's the best player in the NBA right now. Do you think he has that kind of mantra to draw these players in like we saw with Blake Griffin and LaMarcus Aldridge? Because it used to be thought of as just LeBron. If LeBron gets his guys. He gets these guys in the veteran minimum. Is this Durant's time to get it now? And will it last, whether he's with the Nets or another team, do you think it lasts?
Yeah, because, with a star like Kevin Durant, like I mentioned before, stars want to play with stars. And especially when you look at a market like Brooklyn, a big market team in New York City. And that's why guys like Paul Millsap joined, LaMarcus Aldridge joined, Blake Griffin joined. There's always if you look at all those kind of trackers with each free agent, it was always all right, the Lakers, the Warriors, they were always contending teams, but Brooklyn always stood out as a favorite, And, with Kevin Durant, he has a lot of leverage in this situation because when we talked to Blake about it, Blake said, Kevin Durant texted me right away. Same thing with LaMarcus Aldridge. Kevin Durant texted me right away. So you get all these little pieces. So Kevin Durant's definitely got a lot of power to lure these guys to Brooklyn, especially considering what the city and the state and Brooklyn itself has to offer with all the luxuries around it. And obviously, as you guys know, too, with endorsements, players thrive off endorsement deals. And obviously in New York, you can't really get any bigger endorsements than that, And that's obviously a different factor of the whole thing. But, it's like Kevin Durant's one of those players that, he's viewed as if not the best player in the world right now. Obviously, him, LeBron, and Giannis, and Luka, you can even throw in there. Obviously, it's an ongoing debate. Everyone's got their own opinions on it. But you can't overlook what KD's leverage and obviously how he's looked since the injury, his consistency. Tonight was his fifth straight game scoring 30 or more points, And obviously, you look at the other guys that are built here, veteran stars. Stars, like I said, any star that's really comes out on the buyout market, whether it's a former star, current star, you don't know kind of who it is. Because obviously the buyout market, it's one of those things you kind of see how it goes out or the waiving or trading throughout on the deadline and what teams have interest in stuff. But another key factor in this as well is, like you mentioned, the veteran minimum deals. Because this Nets team doesn't have a lot of money to spend on guys at all. That's why you saw guys like Landry Shamet get traded. Yeah. You guys saw how Bruce Brown didn't get a big deal. He had to take a qualifying offer to stay with this team and really win a ring if he really wanted to, right? That's why he stayed. you look at like other guys around. Even that's why they locked up Kevin Durant, and especially with Kevin Durant, he signed a 4-year extension. He's not going anywhere, you know. So that's a big factor into all this as well when it comes to recruiting free agents.